Welcome to today's episode of TheSquare. It's going to be a little different. I'm going to tell you right off the bat. I'm in studio with John Higgs, the used to be president of the MediaLab, now the principal of the MediaLab, and Luke Boney, our DP, and probably the chief mastermind behind the Majestic Studio, which is where we are right now. And we're going to talk a little bit about storytelling, but we've been kind of hinting at this episode for a while now, because how this room came to be, how the studio came to be, is a pretty incredible story in and of itself. It was a conference room less than a year ago, and now it's the world headquarters of the MediaLab Broadcasting Studio.
Live.
It's true.
We're 100% live right now, guaranteed.
So let's start off just with a little bit of the background of storytelling, because this room didn't come to be just on a whim. It's actually kind of a natural continuation of several different things that have happened that had nothing to do with broadcast. And shameless plug, if you want to know more about how the Media Lab came to be, the 50th episode was an anniversary episode we did, and you can get John gets a lot more in depth in there.
Oh, the COVID super spreader event?
The COVID super spreader event where we all got COVID afterwards. That was Luke's second of 6 times. But tell me a little bit about, it still needs a little bit of background. So give me a little bit of your background and how, you kind of went from being an architect to being a storyteller to combining those.
Yeah, so like the Media Lab in general.
Exactly.
Straight out of school, did like 18 interviews because I really wanted and needed a job. And they progressively did get worse to where the last one was like, okay, that's the last interview I'm going to do. Which it actually has been the last interview that I have done. So started with the Media Lab, or not with the Media Lab, started at Corgan on the aviation team, which was then just the Lynn team. And then somebody sent an email to Jack saying like, hey, we need to buy a 3D Studio Max. Like, we're starting to get in. We had a guy on staff that would paint stuff, really good, talented guy, Gary Angel, would paint stuff by hand. He'd sit in a closet with a mask on all day and just make renderings. And then, of
course...
So not
digitally paint.
Yeah, paint.
Yeah.
But, of course, by the time he actually got it painted, the designers...
had changed everything,
right?
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, now go back and paint over everything you painted.
Yeah.
So there's probably like 8 layers to his. So digital made a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It didn't take rocket science to know, like, oh, we can make changes.
Yeah.
So the lab started in '97, and it really was helping communicate design primarily in 3D space. So
right.
The reason that it still has the name lab is that we bought a bunch of computers and we thought it'd be like a computer lab and everybody would come use it. Everybody was way too busy, and it was really complicated back then to do that type of work. So they just came to us and said, hey, I've got a meeting next week or tomorrow or in 2 hours. Can you do a bunch of renderings for me? And so we were like, cool, yeah, let's do it.
That's back in the days of when you would have everybody turn their computers off when they went home to work, or switch them over so that you could use them to render.
We would use Chuck Norris jokes to try to motivate someone when they left at night to log in for us, and it was about 50% effective.
What were those jokes? Give me one of those jokes.
I didn't send any of those. I used Tears Cure
Dave?
Cancer.
Yeah,
I do remember that.
That's not a joke. That's true. So can you remember, and this is going to be, I think we should all answer this. Do you remember the first story, and it can be building, it can be a movie, it can be whatever, that really made and left an impression, like made you think about story differently?
We've done a lot of good ones. That for me was like probably Toyota.
Well, wait a minute. It doesn't even have to be here. It
I
could be
love
like
that his first story that really impacted him
was Toyota after he started working here.
Via Toyota.
Because I agree with you about Toyota, and we're going to talk about that.
Yeah.
But before that, like maybe back in art school.
Man, there's a lot. I think, the classics like Shawshank Redemption is one that always, like, no matter what, is always like, yeah, that's probably everyone's top 10. But I think any powerful story of redemption, I think I'm behind.
Mine is probably, and there's been an incredible amount of stories since then, but Memento was the first movie I remember watching where I walked away like having because of the way it was told, I had an understanding of how that character experienced things. Like, it wasn't just a powerful story, it was how I understood it from the point of view. Like, it changed my point of view of thinking about a character. There's been a stream of movies that have done that since then, but I really liked that one. How about for you? Was it a building?
Well, I'll do a movie first because
Okay.
this is the first story that is told about me that was related to storytelling, and I don't actually remember the facts, and it
that always makes for a better story.
Widely varies, right? So when I was little, we were living in the Netherlands at the time, and we took a trip to the UK in London, and we watched a play, and it was Annie. Mm-hmm. And the same time we watched, I believe it was the second Star Wars, it was The Empire Strikes Back. So I either allegedly stood up at The Empire Strikes Back and said, that was so much better than Annie, or Annie was so much better than Star Wars. And so I will ask my mom, and it'll be a tagline at the bottom of this. You'll find out which one it actually was, because I really can't remember. So
Fair enough.
So clearly good and bad stories, and I won't signify which one was good or which one was bad, had an impact on me pretty early. But when you were talking about asking the question, I started thinking about architecture school and a building that could tell a story. And so for me, when I was working on my thesis, I did a song, a movie, and a building. And so the movie was Seven, a song was A Song by Live, and the building was the Holocaust Museum in DC. And so in touring that, like if the outside fits DC, right, and there's so many restrictions, it was really limited. But what they did on the inside, and I don't even know how much of it was intentional to tell a story, but at the time I was really looking for story-driven spaces, and so like everything had symbolism in it for me. So they put you in an elevator at the beginning, and it just felt like you were in the elevator an uncomfortably long amount of time. And I have to believe that was intentional and not just a bad elevator.
Yeah.
And then the way they did some displays at things that no one should even see, but you need to see to understand it, they would hide those behind walls, similar to the same way that I feel like they hid those places from the inhabitants of the city. And so there's a ton of symbology in that for me, and it huge impact on me. I mean, we went in as a group. I have no idea who I was even with. You didn't know, and you just kind of finished and went through at your own pace.
Do you remember how long it took you to get through?
It was most of the day, and I was like, you're drained when you get through it. And we went down to the Vietnam Memorial, which I expected to have this big impact, but I had just come from that. And so just that one, and when my dad was in Vietnam, it just didn't land on me the same way that this other experience did.
It's crazy. I hadn't heard you use that example before, because I got to experience that last year, but we only had 2 hours, and it felt like we did it a disservice. Yeah. Because once you're in it, like there's not really any getting out of it. It's, you follow this path from the fourth floor down.
I think there's emotional breaks in it. Again, it's been a while since I've been to it, but
it's not like a museum though, where you can go to different exhibits.
Yeah,
like,
and you're not going to like, hey, let's go to a party afterwards or anything.
Totally. But even in 2 hours, like it was. Some of those spaces you're talking about, the one area with the pictures that go up the mirrored wall and room is just incredible.
So buildings can tell great stories.
For sure. So let's talk a little bit about. So Luke, let's see. I started a little over 11 years ago. You started here almost 10 years ago. John's been here 20-something years. We'll just leave it
96.
At that. Wow.
That's when I started.
So we've had the opportunity to go really all over the world telling stories.
Together.
A lot of times. Your second day, Luke, go ahead.
We went to Dubai.
Your claim to fame.
16-hour direct flight.
16-hour direct flight. Never got up to go to the restroom. That's hardcore. That's awesome.
It's out there for everyone to hear now. We don't even have to tell the story again.
Yeah. Emirates had a fantastic entertainment system on it. And I had a lot to get through.
And at a certain point, it just became a matter of pride.
Yeah. 2 hours left. I was like, you know what? We're going to make it. And we did.
So we've gotten to tell some incredible stories. You mentioned Toyota earlier. That's definitely one that kind of stands out to me, because we were able to the story, and we'll put links to all of this down in the description, but the story that we told to help Corgan win the project, but then the way we got to partner with them to tell stories to get people to move from California to the plains, as they called it originally. Fossils, another one that really stands out, because I think that's really when Corgan started to really think about MediaLab focusing on them.
Yeah.
So at various times throughout the journey, we have found tools that have been in service of storytelling. We have a great toolbox of things that we can do, but they're all in service of telling a compelling story. So I'm thinking about drones. Like, tell me a little bit about how we got started in drones.
Well, I definitely think I look at the world and I love technology, but I definitely love quickly trying to learn about something and seeing if it's a tool that I can use, whether here in life or whatever. And so drones is one of those things where, like, I mean, we pretty much started right at quadcopters, because up until then I looked at single rotor stuff and I was like, I don't know, I'm not. They shouldn't trust me with that big of a blade. And then basically, as soon as flight controllers got cheap enough where I can, reasonably order one, it did come via donkey from China. It took like 4 months to get there. But I got a flight controller. I built, a plastic, I forget what they call it, a NASA flight controller.
Yeah.
Flame wheel drone. I carried a GoPro. Footage was worthless, but man, it flew, and I did destroy it.
So
and then rebuild it.
No gimbal whatsoever.
No gimbal whatsoever. Destroyed it like the first 2 flights. Rebuilt it. Learned a ton. Came here, and then they started like getting a little bit more prosumer friendly, however you want to say it.
Welcome DJI into the market.
It showed up. Me and Brandon are like, well, we got to put this third-party gimbal on it. We're soldering up the 5-volt leads.
Yeah, like I approved it.
Yeah.
And before I could even see it,
We
was
had the top off.
opened up, and you were soldering something on it. Oh, like,
So-
here's our new drone.
Let me back up. I like to drive the line of crazy to useful, and that was one. But I mean, like throughout, I mean, you'll see it through this episode. Throughout, like not only John trusting us, but like us being like, whoa.
Well, my
Let's
favorite
try
was
it.
really what our plan was, which was we were going to have a whole fleet of drones,
Yes.
right? And then we were going to train the architects.
It's actually not too dissimilar from what you were thinking about from the lab. Like, we're going to give them the tools to do it, and then, we end up
and
being
we
the ones to go
bought-
do
we
it.
bought all these toy ones for them to do their training
practice.
courses
Yeah.
on.
We had a
We had this
training
whole
course.
curriculum.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then we told legal we were going to do this, and they were like, that's a terrible idea.
Yeah.
So now there's 3 pilots, 4 actually.
Yeah.
Yeah,
person
that's
behind
right.
the
We got
scenes.
Steven as our fourth one.
But anyways, finding those tools and I think once I have a gut feeling, I bring it here. Y'all start coming up with crazy ideas I didn't even think of, which is awesome. But then those ideas
then you
become
get to
the
go do them.
challenges, which is awesome. And I mean, that's how I've grown, to what I do now.
Well, and that's kind of how VR happened too, right?
Rinse and repeat, baby. Like,
Yeah,
well,
but you knew when you put the headset on.
Oh, yeah.
So you were just like, if I can get John
and it,
to put the headset on, this is going to be a win.
which is funny. Like we pack our schedules pretty full. Like it took like 7 tries. Like of going to malls. Like do we have an hour here? We can peel off and go to this demo because like when Vive did it was only in Microsoft stores, which there's not many of them.
Yeah.
But we kept visiting cities that had them, and we were trying to make it happen. But once once I put the headset on, I was like, if we
is
don't have this,
stupid.
we're
Yeah.
silly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So once I did, we saw the value, and now it's what we do now. So.
Well, now Amin and Dave and a whole section of the VFX staff is committed to just using it as a tool.
Yeah,
Again,
I think that's with like you said with the drones, the technology's gotten better, and then our use of it has gotten better, and now we don't even think about it. It's just it's such a part of every story we tell probably has some aerial footage in it.
Yeah.
That it just becomes part of the.
How do you think we filter out the stuff? Because again, I'm really proud of the toolbox we have and the team that we have, but there's also things we say no to, like. I know
Jibs.
Yeah, no more jibs. But there's things like we got some questions and briefly looked at doing like the 3D 360s and stuff like that, and some of it just is a little bit more gimmicky, and so we just kind of let it
We've
fall
had
to the
stuff
wayside.
that we've tested that didn't go well, right? Like we have this amazing hologram machine somewhere
from Alibaba.
And if y'all didn't hear it, Adam did roll his eyes. But that's
So
we can put a demo in that.
It's really whether or not we can make it, be something that is helpful in telling the story.
Yeah, we had the TVs that had the 3D technology as well. So I think if there's stuff that makes sense to play with, like everything's not going to work. Failure is as important as success.
Sure.
But certainly the market to get in that, like there's a LG TV that rolls up, right? Or this panel behind us. We want if there's any sponsors that wants to sponsor this as an LED wall, now's your chance.
Yeah, we will put your logo somewhere on there.
Constantly. And you'll be our favorite vendor ever.
Yeah, 100%.
But there's stuff that we just have to wait
Yeah.
Yeah.
for it because we're just not
That's-
gonna
yeah.
like while we'll take a risk. There's a financial aspect to what we do as well,
Sure.
and we want to be good stewards with the money that Corgan
Well,
gives
to tie
us.
it back, I honestly believe it ultimately comes down to how we tell stories with it. I mean, I don't know if that was your point, but
Yeah.
I want to make sure it's my point.
And how
Yeah.
easy it is to use.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and at some point, like there's a logistical, financial thing to make sense. But then, but 360 is a good example. Like, man, we went hard with it, but it was at the moment, which it could change in the future, but it's still a story that's still hard to approach for the viewer and the
Yeah.
creator.
I still feel like it's an untapped, like on a commercial level, right?
Yeah.
Like they're making so many bad films that are just remakes of films, right? Like, but
Yeah.
I would pay to watch the same film like a dozen times, knowing
You could look at it in any direction.
it's going to be a totally different experience
Yeah.
every time I do it.
But I think ultimately that's what we pin it against is like, is this going to tell a strong enough story that like hopefully will even be make 2 more jobs for people.
You're right.
To grow how we tell a story, but also grow like is it going to fit in the toolbox and be there on purpose.
Well, and one of the ways that we were starting to tell those stories was to come up with the Square podcast, which was, it was a team effort. We worked on it for maybe 6 to 9 months before we even recorded the first episode. And the week we were supposed to film the first episode was when Dallas shut down for the pandemic. And I think one thing that hasn't been said, or has maybe been subtly said, and I'm not just saying this because they're the executive leadership committee, but our executive leadership committee, so our CEO and 2 presidents.
He rolled right into their new titles.
Right,
So
just
good.
new titles. They just got new titles.
Well, just a new.
But the elders have been incredibly supportive of what we do. In fact, Lindsay multiple times has said, "Bring me something to say no to," and we have yet to have her say no to something. But I think that having that mentality of really supporting us has been really important. And
You just don't remember if she says
I just
no
forget
because you
the
just
no's.
keep asking until she
that's
says
probably,
yes.
That's probably true.
We've already bought it this time.
But I remember her. Calling her from home the day after we were in lockdown and saying, "Hey, we were going to be doing the Square. Do we need to just put it on hold?" And she said, "No, I think now is more than ever is an important time to get our story out."
But I would say, Corgan does some amazing projects, and they don't do a good job always of sharing those.
Yeah.
We're focused on the client stories a lot more of the time than we are, and that
Right.
was a chance to that's what it started as. Right
Sure.
now, it's kind of evolved where there's some people on there that are
curious
just
conversations,
Yeah, they're
yeah.
just great conversations.
Yeah.
So.
But I remember calling Luke and saying, "Okay, we're going to do this," and he goes, "Okay." It's like he's strapping in for another ride.
Making the list. Okay, go pick up this in the studio.
And I'll have to see if I can find some photos. But we came up here, got the gear so that we could do the first broadcast out of my guest bedroom. Where my router is in my house wasn't working. And so we had to run a cable out a window and down to the kitchen. And we
looked
had
good in the kitchen.
my son, I know I have footage of this. My son was doing the mic test for me at, 5 years old while I was trying to remote desktop with you and do a bunch of stuff. But that really was the beginning of where we are now, not just from a broadcast standpoint, but also from being able to do that as a remote broadcast, because that became a big part of why we got the Majestic too.
I would say it definitely was our foot in the door of multicam, real multicam, which, I'll let you continue.
Because
but,
up to then, we just shot it and the editors figured it out at the end.
yeah, normal production, but the versus a wide and close up, this is camera A, camera B, camera C.
Yeah.
If there's more people, there's more more
Cameras, more
but,
audio.
It was a step towards that, which I don't want to jump ahead, but throughout the pandemic, all the pursuits went online.
Yeah. So, that's a good point. So then after, I don't know, maybe a couple of months, we got clearance to come up and be in the skyline.
Yeah, there was a group A,
Yeah.
which had a core group of people that were
I
in
think
the
we
building
were
at
up
that
here
point.
even before Group A because the building was still shut down when we first came back.
The sodas did not get refilled.
No.
Yeah. You start drinking a Diet Coke, you're like,
No Wednesday donuts.
yeah, that's out of date. Put that down.
So we got to take over the
Still no
skyline.
Wednesday Donuts plug again.
Yeah, we got to take over the skyline and do. It can't be understated. We really do need Wednesday Donuts back again to take over because nobody was in the building, so it wasn't interrupting anyone, and we basically took over half the.
Yeah,
skyline.
that really was our first studio. It was
Yeah.
a great space for that.
We can show a short clip of like a wide shot.
And go.
Yeah.
Wow, that was
And
great.
we're back.
That was awesome. Wow, the light.
Well, the depth. Yeah, it was a
we
little bit
had-
different
It was
space.
a definitely different space. But then, so to your point, so we were doing the square, and then we realized, and the reason, one of the big reasons why we did the skyline was we were having to. I was having to set up and tear down every time we did it at my house, and so we realized, hey, we do enough media creation. If we could just have a dedicated space where we didn't have to set up and tear
Well,
down every time.
I don't know if you remember. Were you here when we actually moved into this facility?
No.
We asked for
A
a
studio?
studio originally because at the time we were still doing a lot of green screen people, which is still the
Yeah.
best way to get people in your
Animations.
your visual
Yeah.
effects stuff. And so it was an ask at the original building, and they were like, "You want how many square feet
Of empty
for a
space?
green
Yeah.
room?" Like, that's not going to happen.
Which, if you commit to it, I mean, it was 2007.
Yeah, technically.
you can get it. You wear them out.
So then we were able to keep things set up, which cut our setup time by a ton. But then we, like you were about to say, we had these remote interviews.
Well,
Well, we would
saying-
still travel. We were doing shoots in California for something. So you
Yeah.
tear down the whole studio because it was the same
Yeah.
year.
Yeah.
And that was on
Yeah.
the tail end of the pandemic. But
Yeah.
I was going to say, in parallel, we were helping all these architects with their webcam and like,
Yeah.
Ugh,
like
nose
it-
shots.
that was probably one of the hardest years of my life because every
Sitting in
day
front
I'd
of a-
sign on and they would be the worst camera
Awful.
angle, the worst lighting.
They'd be a
the worst
silhouette.
sound.
in front of the window. Yeah.
And I mean, everyone was trying their best. It was the pandemic, and it was crazy. But like and we'd always get them looking good. But it was always like, as someone who just wants to hold the camera and just like get it looking good really quick. Yeah, I had to talk through every little step. And anyways, in parallel was all these pursuits. We were still trying to win work.
Yeah.
Was happening once we got up in the sky with the square, it was like, well, can I present from here? And it was like, yeah, let me look into that. Let me do this. And
Yeah, I feel like pretty early on, I don't know what Square episode, whether it was like the 4th or 5th when we were set up. We were. I remember looking at the setup, being like, we got to be able to do this live. Like,
Yeah.
it's too good.
Yeah.
And the camera setup and the multi-camera, like that, the online experience is terrible. We can create an experience that's better.
I think Bruce Mao ended up being our first live Square episode too.
right.
And he was probably 10 or 15.
Well, he was
in.
live on a television,
He
right?
was, yeah, he was remote, but Corey and I were live.
yeah, like when we in that same time, it basically the steps it took from like, well, we need to do it live. Well, we need to do it for pursuit. Well, I just want one good webcam. So
Yeah.
we set up
Right.
one shot with good lighting, good sound. Then it was like, well, can we have 2 people? Can we have 3 people? Can we have 4 people? And it was like, okay, you be in this room, you be in that room, and
Well, I think we were all experiencing it or experimenting different. Like, right, I just
Yeah.
wanted to set my GH5 up
Yeah.
as my webcam
Yeah.
so I could do depth of field and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay, well, then let's play with this software.
Yeah.
And then you
This
guys
capture
were,
card,
Yeah, and
yeah.
you guys were looking at switchers for the Square and,
I
it was like
had
a different
one,
software.
one class in video engineering. And, I pulled on
Yeah,
lean
but
on
you,
that a
you
lot.
have Reddit now, so
Yes. Shout out to video engineering subreddit. Incredible people.
yeah.
We were like, it went from like, TV, setting up a camera in your living room to like doing a line. Like, it was like every week it was like reinventing everything we were like, not everything, but like reinventing the whole idea of what we're capable of and doing.
Well, and the funny part is you weren't, with VR and with the drones, there was things moving forward, but it was I feel like at a much slower pace and in a more normal system. When we were doing all this, the platforms kept changing. Like, for
Yeah.
example, originally we were like, oh man, Zoom's really got it, and shout out to Microsoft, which I never thought I'd say those words. They have
Does they make LED walls?
Teams has continued to, like, with their NDI capabilities, like, I don't know what we would have done, because they've done a really good job of progressing their system.
Yeah.
along.
Yeah. Well, it definitely,
Well, an NDI.
yeah.
Yeah.
Shout out to New Tech. They do make LED walls, I think. No, I'm just kidding. I was going to say, it was fun being a part of the online communities that were in a come to find out, TV's been around a long time.
Yeah.
And this broadcast situation, there's a lot of
Oh,
choices.
you mean when we go to NAB every year, there's a whole section related to this?
I think it's a whole hall. Yeah.
Well, and part of it's seeing what other people were doing that worked for them but wouldn't work for us. Because I remember there was one YouTube series of these guys that they would have an individual computer for every single person.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was like, we want to take the online meeting experience, make it as high quality as possible, as interactive as possible, and we want to do that. We had to pipe in PowerPoint, pipe in, a mixer of some kind. And at one point, I think we did do a laptop, especially to record. I had like 5 laptops up recording screen captures, which, looked
Is
like
what it
screen
is.
capture. Yeah.
Well, did anyone else watch more and more news?
Oh man,
During that time, you're like-
regional news.
Yeah, well, anything that's like, oh, they have 4 people on camera. How'd they do that? They're not in the same location. And then the tickers that are at, like, you just start looking at. It's not a movie.
Oh yeah.
It's a totally different
you are
visual
live.
setting.
Well, it's funny the amount of content, like video content out there that's like behind the scenes of the Super Bowl or whatever. Like, there's not much. They keep it under lock and key, which is good on the, like it is important to have that, but like to try to learn it. The people that did upload the audio from, like the director calling the show or, truly the workflow behind the scenes, necessarily than like a picture or whatever, was like super vital to me.
Yeah.
But like I would come up, we'd do it one way, and I'd go home and like research what would be a better way to do that, or learn it in some way, and come back, and like we all were doing that to a point.
Well, and I think it can't be overstated and I know the pandemic's kind of a tired topic at this point, but we would not be here if it wasn't for the pandemic.
Yeah.
Because that was, I think, one of the other reasons that we progressed so much is the executive leadership committee found a way to use it where they were basically talking to the whole firm, wherever their offices were. We had it every single week for a while, and then it went to once a month. But that became a vital part of us communicating as a firm.
I mean, for sure, once the proposals went online and people it's still they're online, right?
Yeah.
Like if there's a company and there's 5 decision makers and they're in different cities, they're not necessarily willing to fly them all into the same space to make these decisions. And so the online, I mean, it just wouldn't. We wouldn't be in this. We would have been asking still for a green screen room instead.
So then we can fast forward a little bit, and we basically got to where everybody was coming back to the office.
They wanted their space back.
Taking over half the skyline was no longer an option.
Yeah, it's really messy.
And so we
and then we were shooting in it, so we literally was closed even when we weren't using it, or when we were using it. So
we had those little red stickers. It was like, hey, we're filming. And they would just not see them.
If you see a filming sign, just play it around.
So then part of this was there was a storage room, and then there was a conference room, and the conference room section was kind of underutilized.
Yeah, and it's just location of where it's at in the building. Yeah,
and it had the convenience of having relatively high ceilings, and so we took one of those ideas to say no to and said, hey, what are the possibilities? And to their credit, they were like, yep, let's see what we can do. And then now we have the Majestic, and we'll add some footage in here so you guys can see kind of what this looks like. But I think one of the things that's really important about the Majestic Studio is really only half the studio. The other half is the control room, where we do a fair amount of production that has nothing to do with the studio, because that remote interview, virtual interview thing hasn't stopped.
Yeah, I mean, here in 2023, right?
Yeah.
Kids
Live,
baby. No, so yeah, here in 2023, we're still like doing a ton of online pursuits where no cameras are on in here. We're only taking webcam people. I'm still coaching people with webcams.
Yeah.
It's still part of the process, but. We're doing a ton of virtual pursuit. I don't even know virtual. I don't know what we call them, but like
interviews. Pursuits,
yeah. Virtual interviews.
Well, one of the things I like is that as we come up with problems and challenges, we end up finding solutions that we would never have thought before. And so, for example, we we had the problem because gear and materials in general were difficult to get during the pandemic, and we're still having that. And so even just these panels, we came up with the idea of we wanted to be able to put LEDs behind them to change the color so they didn't.
Well, and shout out to Branded Environments because they did a lot
did
of like.
a
There's a
heck
lot
of
of
a
people
job.
did a lot of work on this.
Yeah, for
sure.
There's 3 of us sitting here, but you could have easily had, interior design, acoustics, branding,
different
a lot of
people.
that stuff. Yeah.
You are also experts in doing that.
Yes.
To be able to tap into that was.
And we would
We
go
just
to them
knew
and
what
say,
we wanted it to look like from the camera.
We'd say, hey, we want a background, but we don't want it to stay the same background. And they'd be like, all right. And so we came up with the idea of putting the holes in there, putting the LEDs through it. But it was going to take like 3 months to get this, and the rest of the room was ready to go, relatively ready to go. And so we just had the white backdrop with some different lights.
Have we even explained it? Because it's very Larry King live, and I don't think that was the intention.
None of us. And we did a fair amount of visualization for this room just by nature of who we are, and none of us picked up on the Larry King live thing until the panels were up.
But our agility sequence,
Yes.
which is core to our brand, was the inspiration for it.
Is what we were going
Yeah.
for. And so we had just white walls for a long time with RGB color washers, and we realized, man, we really like that. And that's going to give us something that's different than the background you see now. And so we went, mind you, they've already paid for this. And we went back to them and said, hey, look, we still want the background, but we'd like a little bit more money because we'd really like to do a track system. And they were like, we made the case, and we decided we would not only do a white cyc, but we would do a green cyc because we do a fair amount of
Is
still
this when
green
Adam
screen.
comes in and starts to
Yeah,
put
hey,
the white
Adam,
side
do you want to
around?
come pull the... will it
And change
work?
it, put
Hold on.
the
I'm
Fanatics
just gonna
colors
grab
up.
We'll just blur his face out.
We're gonna find out if this actually works. I haven't actually seen him do it.
So I'll talk over this. So it's a track system with white. It's done by a theater company that did awesome. They got a seamstress out here and everything. In the bottom, there's a part for metal rails that will pull it taut down, and then Velcro on either side to pull it the direction. And you pretty much set it up the night before. The next day, it's got all the wrinkles out. This is
We
green.
finally got the green screen.
And it's green. Yeah, and we got a green room.
And now we could put you anywhere in the world, half of you anyway.
Cue a logo to
Yeah.
Brought to you by.
But I mean, obviously, it'll have a different lighting setup when we actually are doing it. But like that was something that we didn't think of before. We would never really have known that we wanted the white cyc, except for the panels being 2 months late. And then we were like, ooh, we really like that, and so
Yeah.
we were able to add to it.
I think a lot of people would have put green on the wall and put the background above, but I think this actually is more compact. And we don't use, if we use green like every week, it makes
Yeah.
sense. But we use
Yeah.
the studio every week,
Yeah.
so it's really worked out.
Well, and even down, we're just giving a lot of shout outs, but shout out to the Dallas Scenery guys because they helped us develop the system that gets this becomes super tight, super wrinkle free when it's set up correctly. It doesn't take that long to set up. I literally can just say, hey, we need it set up, and then I come down an hour later and it's
For
done.
Brandon,
It's that
like
quick.
instant. It's amazing.
Okay, so then I'm just curious, like, I know that things continue to evolve and we continue to kind of push boundaries. What do you think's next?
I
mean,
have an idea because it's sitting in our closet upstairs. So I mean, the big challenge for us is we invested in this space, right?
Right.
And it's these are not cheap spaces,
Sure.
and so a company has to be willing to understand its value,
Yeah.
which Corgan does. But Dallas is not the only place we have an office.
That's true.
So.
That's a
Can,
good point.
can we
That is-
build this in every city? We're in the Empire State Building in New York. I'm pretty sure the square footage on this would make it not cost effective.
We could put 24 people in this space.
And the
in
more
New
we did
York.
that, most of the interviews were never even for us. While the client was spread out, we were spread out, right?
Yeah.
So you have somebody in LA, you have somebody in Phoenix, and you have somebody in Dallas and Austin, and they're all going to do this project together for this client, right? And what makes it work is that they're all going to do this project together, right?
Right.
There's a reason that somebody from every office is there. So when we go to the virtual interview, we want the people in all those offices to look as good as here, right?
Yeah.
So that's been our, I don't know if it's our current challenge, but I'm really excited about what Luke has done with it.
yeah, it's a challenge. It's been a project.
Well, and I'm excited because one of the things that we also ended up doing a fair amount of that we don't do hardly anywhere in the offices in the States was in the London office with Francis. We did a lot of digital virtual charrettes. So we were bringing people in from the
All
Middle
over the
East
world.
and all
Yeah.
over the world, from Dallas, from Chicago, and they would do not just a presentation where you have a PowerPoint, but they would do 3-hour long design charrettes where people are ideating and whatnot. And that's, I think, one of the biggest challenges of the pandemic is still having that collaboration when you're not in the same room.
Well, and making it, who wants to go to a meeting that's not entertaining
Yeah.
at some level, right? So he's like,
Exactly.
yes, you need to get your business done that's in the meeting, but hopefully it's both informative and
Right.
either inspirational or entertaining. And that was what was missing with those charrettes is just, if you were there, it was a great experience. And when everyone was online, it was a great experience. But when you had the hybrid,
Yeah.
it really falls apart pretty quick.
Yeah.
And so
That's what we're working on. At
So
a
I'm-
basic level,
go ahead.
It's a cart with pan tilt cameras with a bunch PTZ cameras with a bunch of screens
that we can control
that
from
we
here,
can control from here, and
they plug in.
All they have to do is
Yeah.
plug in a power and a network cable, and you're
And
on
then
your
we are
devices.
designating areas that because
sound baffling and whatnot.
well, and just that look great, right?
Yeah.
Like places in the office, that, this is where it goes when you do a broadcast. So that can't be its only purpose
Yeah.
because it'll be a conference room or some other crit space or something else. But it's a
It'll
designated
be an agile
zone.
space.
Yes.
Nice. He was talking about some of the different things we did with Design Charrettes. I'm thinking about, I don't know if we can say their name, but the company we were working with in California that we did the furniture, the 100 pieces of furniture. That was a
was
unique
really cool.
experience because we had all the furniture set up in a warehouse, and we would roll along with 2 or 3 cameras, and not just cameras, but also laptops, so that people that were remote in other places could, as close as possible, test the furniture. And
Well, they would even ask it doesn't look very stable, and someone would climb up on the chair and
top of
start
it.
jumping around on it. It's
how
like,
comfortable is
it'll
it?
hold them.
imagine like a laptop on like a desk that rolls around, and then I'm holding a camera, and it was like 5 hours long.
When you started, what was the camera we were shooting with?
Red Scarlet.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
so,
right.
which is not it's a
Yeah.
complicated camera, and the workflow for it isn't like straight out of the box
Yeah.
type thing. So,
Shout out to Red.
so there's you got a learning curve on that, right?
Yeah.
Like, what percentage of that would you say versus having to know
You're
everything
saying-
that's in that room?
Let me rephrase the question. You're saying, in all the technology advances we've had, there's a bit of learning curve, and what percentage has this been compared to other?
Yeah, or just
things?
kind of what you thought your job was when you started here.
film versus
I
broadcast
would
is
say
like
FPV drone is a little bit less than this because that took a lot of physical practice.
Yeah.
But I mean, this is I practically changed careers while having a career. I think not that I mean, just like my process of learning, it took a lot of time. It took a lot of effort.
I'm gonna remove these backgrounds because
Yeah, that's good. Just do it silently while I'm talking.
I mean, but that's kind of the point. Is I don't think anyone has an appreciation. They may just walk into a control room and they're like, oh, everybody knows how to, or whoever did this knew how to do it.
Yeah, and probably a lot of people would have hired an integrator or someone to be alongside, but somehow we do it.
Well,
Okay.
and to some extent, it is the Wild West, and that we're not
It's
ABC,
true.
NBC, CBS.
We are not
right?
a typical studio in the slightest. And what makes us different is the virtual pursuits, where you're taking virtual feeds, but you're also having someone in the studio, and that's got more common practice now. But when we were putting it together, it was people were just plugging in old laptops they had in a closet
Yeah.
and hoping you can run Zoom.
When it has to be two-way, right? So a broadcast news is just, here's the news, you can change the channel whenever you want. But
Right.
an interview,
How do I mix minus the Teams audio back to you in the control or in the studio, and it not be cumbersome or get
Echo.
an infinite
Echo.
I think the other big part of the learning curve is not figuring out how just to make it work, but what's the right way to do it, and the right way to do it isn't necessarily the way it's always been done. A lot of times that serves as a template, but then what I really like is and this is really across the board, Ludo and his field and everything. We look for not just a way to do it, but what's the right way for us, because that could also be different. And in learning all of that, we've been able to then offer this as a service to clients to be able to go and set up, because broadcast spaces are becoming such a bigger, more common thing.
I think you'll see more of these in more facilities now.
Yeah, regardless of
I mean,
the type
based
of
off even the
business.
people that come by and see ours,
Yeah.
like clients, and are like, oh, we can have one of those? Like,
They either say one of two things: can we use it?
yes.
Yeah.
Or can we have this?
Yeah.
Yes. And the answer is, if you're a client, yes.
Yes.
And if you're not a client yet, let's talk.
Yeah, let's talk.
So let's talk a little bit about. Well, I tell you what. While we're sitting here, let's talk a little bit about what some of the decisions that went into the Majestic, the actual studio part. Yeah.
So we will show you footage from a separate camera where we're kind of walking around, but we have Blackmagic ATEM cameras that run Ethernet to a camera converter that go to SDI to a big switch. And I say all of that because we have patch panels. We have 2 of them in here.
Yeah.
So we run cables up to the ceiling and the patch panel. My biggest, every time we had a meeting about it, someone were like, oh, let's put this piece of furniture without wheels in it. I would say, please put wheels on it. Because my big goal is if it can't
There are
be
wheels
an
on our
empty
table.
box
Yeah.
in a matter of minutes, it's a lot more work for me. And we also, one cool thing is we came up with the shape of this table. It's not a square, and it's not a rectangle, and it's basically like 2 trapezoids, which is fun because what you want people to open up to camera a little bit, but not be a panel.
Sometimes
either.
there's 2, and sometimes there's 3, and
yeah.
5, and
Sometimes
7.
there's
And so
6,
we
yeah.
need
We can
that
flip
flexibility.
this
Yeah.
horizontal, and now you've got more of a
Agility.
panel style, but at least it's a little bit more coming around, and everyone's kind of facing the wide shot.
So is there any flaw in this table and removing it
No,
from?
they did great. No, I mean, I think
Shout out to a bigger door.
it does not fit the door, out the door. That was one of the things that does have to stay in here.
But I mean, that's part of the compromise. Like that wasn't a design decision. We had talked about that ahead
We
of time.
had the door.
We
the
just
doors
had
were
the
already
door
there,
existing,
and
it
we
was
wanted
a
a
budget
bigger
decision.
one. But
So
we didn't have a bigger door.
you
already.
got to give and take.
Yeah.
I think y'all stepped on each other during
Yeah,
that. I don't
it won't
know.
matter.
Okay.
They'll never be able to prove anything if they can't hear what we said.
I mean, I think the table. I think we learned a lot from it. Like in working, so this was a learning lesson for us too. Working with an architecture firm that buys and works with real furniture or
Right.
whatever. This is camera world. Like make it out of styrofoam, put some veneer on it, and call it a day.
So
You know-
you're saying you spent less on your car than this table?
We don't need to go into that. But I mean, it will last longer than my children, which is great.
Yeah.
But like one thing I think as we grow in our studio stuff, we'll look at more furniture that is like it just needs to look good. Literally,
Yeah.
that's it.
That's it.
Well, we had our first more kind of like casual setting in here
Yeah.
last week, which was fun. It was cool to see the space,
Yeah.
like
Utilized in a
transition.
different way,
yeah, because
yeah.
we use this table a lot.
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. And I think it's gonna be fun. Using. Now that again, we're only 9 months into this. We are not even walking yet.
Yeah.
And so like being able to see where it's going to go with the backgrounds, like the furniture, the flexibility, the look, how it's all going to look is going to be really, really interesting.
Well, and building off your idea of everything had to have wheels, I think one of the things that we talked about early on is that we don't want any stands. Like we're going to have tripods or pedestals for the cameras, but other than that, we don't want anything on the floor. And so having the grid, especially when we knew that we were going to have different lighting setups where, hey, we're going to have the green screen. We don't want to have to move a bunch of lights. We're just going to keep lights up there, and they're only going to use them for the green screen or for the square setup or for whatever it is. So having the grid and having all of the cabling and the stands and everything put up in the ceiling makes this area so much bigger.
The camera's going to make this look like it's just massive.
Yeah.
In here, I'm going to tell you right now, it's a nice studio size, but it would be considered a very small studio.
Yeah.
I think
We do have a client that's building one half the size of this, so
Yeah.
that's a challenge.
that will be a small room.
But it still looks good.
yeah,
Yeah,
it does.
it'll look good.
And it felt taller than when we were in there last
when we were
time,
in there
which is
last
cool.
time, yeah. All right, then we'll transition to the control room, but tell me a little bit about, one of the big things I think in there was that we definitely wanted to do right was the broadcast desks.
Yeah. So
Well, how about our first desk? You want to describe those? Do we have a
Home
picture?
Depot,
we went
baby.
to Home Depot. We still have them in storage.
And they were on wheels.
And they were on wheels. But that was because we were rolling them
And
all
they
over
fit
the
through
building.
doors and in an elevator.
That's true. All of this
Yeah.
is true.
I mean, when we were adapting, it was something like, well, we want to buy it for a long, we don't want to buy it for a day. It's got to last
Right.
a little bit, but we knew it wasn't going to last forever, so we did go with Home Depot tables. That looked great. You know.
They actually
well,
worked
they worked.
Yeah.
For what we
for
were
our
doing.
needs. Yeah, they worked really good.
I did show up late when they were assembling it, and I just saw an angle grinder and drills everywhere. And
we needed to modify
pretty
them a
much,
little.
Did we just full circle back to our drone story?
Yeah.
so we love buying stuff and modifying it.
I do think that, the broadcast desks then wouldn't have worked for us because now everything's wired in that desk and we do surprisingly little changing of wires and whatnot. When we had the Home Depot desk, we were always plugging in new boxes and we rewired that skylight easily 4 times.
More than that.
Yeah, more.
Like a month.
And but I think that, as you can kind of lock certain things in as like, okay, we've tested this, we've tried it, we know it's going to work, we're going to move to the next thing.
Yeah.
It can become more stable.
Yeah.
So we have the broadcast decks. The other part of that was really having stations kind of designated for each person.
Yeah, and again, we're not like, if you were to walk into a broadcast studio, there's probably like 6 rows of desks.
Right.
And like everyone's got a small task. We're pretty, for the most part, a smallish team that, the VFX guys got to learn, audio or PowerPoint or whatever. Like we're
Maybe running a camera.
we wear a lot of different hats, and so we needed stations that we only, it's also a small space, so we needed stations that we definitely only needed, like we didn't need any extra, and would be simple enough that it can run the job it needs to without, being in the way.
Well, and I think the pendulum swung at least 2 or 3 times because we taped out the floor. We wanted to make sure that like the control room was the right size, knowing we were going to be using it without the studio. And the studio was the right size.
When we were upstairs, we made that as small as possible because we
Right.
wanted to take it. So we literally couldn't walk behind each other to do anything.
And then we came down here and we taped it out and we're like, okay, we think this is it. So we go into design, we give the construction documents, and I was like, okay, this is what it is. And then I came down here while they were doing it, and I was like, oh, we short sheeted the studio, the control room's way too big. And then now I actually think
That's perfect.
I wouldn't shift it one way or the other. It's exactly right.
I would triple the size of everything. I'm just kidding.
So
what are the stations? You talked about these elusive stations that are in the control room.
We're gonna have to cut to some footage of you going through them.
Bring me the camera.
I am curious, like in here in the studio, what's the most difficult piece of equipment to work with?
I
That's a
don't
good question.
want to lose any sponsors.
You don't have to say the specific name.
So the LED wall behind us? That
No, that was great. Flawless. Never has a problem. Worth every penny. You know what?
Plug your name in here, whoever you are.
Tip 'em. Thank you. No. You're saying the most difficult piece of equipment
Is it the camera and the controls? Has that been the most troublesome?
Yeah. I think
The remote
so.
camera
Well, no,
controls.
I mean, I think what's funny is you come in here and you see a lot of screens. Some of them show the same thing. I without calling them out, I think that is the most difficult.
Yeah.
We
love them. We're not saying we don't love them.
They're always value,
But-
but their value is always perfect. But
Yeah.
the what's promised and what works all the time has not been ideal.
Yeah.
But also, I think just the matrix of all the video in and out. Like we moved in and realized, which we were kind of fearful of, but once we got everything, we ran out of outputs.
Oh, your 24 port.
I remember when my dad first got a PC, and he was like, it was a Dell, and he was like, it has 1.6 gigabytes of memory. I was like, Dad, we would never fill that up, ever. This is 30-something years ago. And I feel like that's kind of like what we did with the hub. We were like, it's a 40 on 40. We will never fill that
40
up.
outputs?
Yeah.
And before we even had everything installed, we had to go get a 20 over 20.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we could probably do another 40 if we really wanted to.
Which, is lessons on us, like truly understanding the amount of outputs and the granular, like, well, we'll get with this. We'll get a screen of the this. We'll get this, and all of a sudden, we busted over the 40 outputs.
So what are the 2 or 3 things, I'm curious for all of us, what are the 2 or 3 things,
I will
if
say-
somebody was going into this, that you'd be like, here's advice?
To reverse a little bit, I will say the hubs themselves, also from the same company, working great.
Work amazingly well.
We
Really,
don't-
really well, actually.
We don't turn them off.
They're
We probably should.
super, super solid.
Yeah.
2 or 3 things
Well,
you would
have
want
made
someone to know.
You made it pretty easy. Like we use little Stream Deck.
Oh man! Hashtag companion big focus. That would be no. Actually, truly, to answer your question,
Yeah.
the number one thing is to look into that program alone. because once you get everything in and you got this tech working, it's plugging, it's working great.
You have to control it.
To dash around
Yeah.
the room, room is really tough. So if you haven't found Bitfocus Companion,
Link in the description below.
yeah, free. I mean, come on, donate what you can.
Yeah.
But I mean, truly integrates with everything and makes one button can do numerous things.
Yeah. I think I'd give another shout out to vMix. Like,
It's true.
we've had the opportunity to actually talk to the guy at some conferences. Super nice guy. He literally stood there for hours while there was a line of people who wanted him to troubleshoot their vMix
tech
problems,
support.
and he did it. He stood there and went through it. So they're a great company.
We have a great tech support team.
It's not flawless, but it takes what you would normally have in like a new tech switcher or something that's a really big hardware thing, and it makes it way more approachable when you're doing it from more of a prosumer level, just because it's software based.
Well, I wonder if we would have even gotten here without it, right? Because we needed a software-based solution
Probably
to just
not.
prove concept.
Yeah.
And at some point, we may not be on a software-based.
We could have used OSB.
Well,
but without
guys,
those,
let me talk through this.
like, going and saying, "Hey, I want you to invest in this," and it hasn't proven its value
Yeah.
yet, would have been a hard sell, I think.
Yeah, the fact they give you a full trial, like of the full version, is pretty. Like, you're exactly right. Like if we had to sample it, I probably would have been like, I can't do what I need, so I'm out. Like sample like just parts of the features. But I definitely think we would have had a lot more of old like we would have done the traditional way, which is a ton of laptops into a physical switcher, and like as clumsy as I am, we would have hated it because I would have accidentally unplugged some HDMI cable somewhere and been stuck with it. But I will say, I mean, the biggest thing is they listen to their community and like they haven't implemented all of the features, of course, that the people want, but like they quickly innovate in things into it. And I will, like broadcast is known to move like super slow, and in the innovation thing, like. I mean, the fact that NDI came out with something soon later, Teams integrated soon later, Teams or vMix already had it, but like a lot of the traditional switchers are still like not integrating those things.
Yeah.
And that's hard to do.
I think the two things I would give as words of advice are: don't be afraid to try stuff and then return it. Like you B&H is amazing. We love B&H. We will order stuff from them that we think is going to work. We're doing it right now on the remote systems that we're working on. We're going to try things. We have a pretty good idea of what's going to work, and then if it doesn't work, that's okay. We return it and we find something else. So don't be afraid to try things. And then the second thing is, and this Luke will smile when I say this, we have a habit of saying, oh, we will never do this, or we will always do this, and then inevitably we break those rules. And so this is from a team that is constantly planning for flexibility and agility in our systems. That said, don't be afraid of something that does one thing really, really well. So like the hub, or like the various elements that they only do one thing, but you will never have to worry about that thing going down.
Well, I'll say this is not for everyone, right? Like,
100%.
And I would say it's more closely related to news. Like, the stress level of live broadcasting is an unbelievable scale compared to video, where you can,
let's just take a moment for everyone that does it on a day-to-day basis.
We love you.
You guys are
having to do
incredible.
an edit on the fly, right?
Yeah.
Like shoot, edit, broadcast, do all in the same moment. Because most of our stuff we've prepped well in advance,
100%.
Even for the interview stuff. So I would say appreciate that, and then like even on a skill set for me, my wife would say I'm not a very good listener.
I don't know
Who
what she's
knows
talking
if she's
about.
right, but I can
Shout
tell
out
you,
to Amber.
I can tell you,
would say
with this
that to you?
job, you have to be able to listen to like 3 things at the same time,
Yeah.
and actually all 3 of those things are really important, because if you're on graphics and you're queuing stuff, you have to listen to on screen. Someone like me or other is rambling on something that they probably didn't need to say in the background, and you have to filter that out while
Adam's telling jokes. Yeah.
and there's just a lot of things going on around you, so it's just a different environment. So that's like, if someone had never done it, be prepared.
It takes some getting used to.
And we're really good friends, and we'll stress each other out.
100%.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, never.
Guys, didn't know I was his friend. This is pretty big. This is a pretty big moment.
So what we'll do is we'll throw you in the control room with a camera so you can go through some of this stuff. take a look, and that'll give you some detail, because we do want to kind of share the knowledge that we found, because the only reason we found it is other people shared it with us.
Yeah.
So here that comes.
All right, so we're going to go on a quick tour of the control room of the Majestic. We've got a lot of screens, a lot of computers. I'm going to try to make this somewhat quick, but just kind of hit the highlights. If you have more questions, comment below. Happy to answer them. Basically, like we said, we kind of we are vMix based, mainly for the NDI features, the mix minus features, the audio features, and the being able to produce outputs that are unique to what we need. Everything camera-wise comes in. We're going to get on our hands and knees here to our converters here via Ethernet from Blackmagic. They then go to the 4040 hub, which then some outputs go to the 20 for monitoring. But then the 4040 goes to vMix. I know this is a lot. Again, we can provide a lucid chart if you want. We record with the ATEM Extreme, where we get 8 ISO feeds. We don't actually switch with it. We literally just use it to record. But it's been pretty awesome. We plan to upgrade to the SDI version eventually. While we're down here, we've got wireless microphones from Sennheiser. Our audio board is Allen and Heath. We are still waiting on our Dante expansion card, but we're just running it over USB right now. It's worked awesome. This is our switching station. We, like I said, love bit focus. It's running a little slow right now, but once it's loaded up, we're able to switch cameras however we need to, and program it to do multiple things. We have a crit space, which will grab one shot of it outside, which is basically a big meeting space that we'll pipe video directly out to. But sometimes we'll take video in from there. So we have to customize the feed to not put its own audio back out there. We'll show you a video or a quick wide shot of it so you can see it. Coming down the line, we've got, this is what we call the director station. So someone will be here saying, you know, ready cam 2, take camera 2. We also use it as a full backup system. So with bit focus, we can hit a button and it switch all the ins and outputs to this computer, which then we can send live with our Blackmagic web presenter. We use PowerPoint to create slideshows. We'll do, you know, 2-up supers or multi-views and put PowerPoint and the person speaking next to it. Next we come, oh, I fell asleep, to the teleprompter, which someone will control to what they see on the teleprompting screens. Lighting is Cham Sys, however you say it. Quick 20, controlling all the lights from here. All of our lights, except a few, are all aperture. They've been working great for us. What else? So we'll go to the control room real quick, as long as my cable will reach. But like I said, Blackmagic cameras. We have Liebeck studio pedestals, which have been awesome and just hold together super well. Like I said, lights are aperture. We change the lights up depending on the show quite a bit. So we have like every modifier they sell, which has been awesome. And comm system, we use EarTech. I'll grab one. For the most part, we also have Unity, which we'll use for bigger shows, but these are kind of our tried and true, like typical show that have been awesome. And Unity also is a great product that we use a ton. It's just easier to hand someone this versus download it on their phone. Well, that's like the 5-second tour of the control room. If you have any detailed questions, please feel free to ask. We love the feedback. So that's it.
All right, well, we want to wrap up this episode the only way that we could, which is to say a big thank you to our entire team. There's
we're not going to ask for the LED screen one more time to close out.
Hey, you need a sponsorship and we need an LED screen. Let's talk.
Hey, Epic Games, I hear you have a video game engine called Unreal that runs on LED screens.
But there's 15 other people that are part of our team, and they are a massive part of how we get to do any of our storytelling, but especially down in the Majestic. We, Amin and Dave, who are on the VFX team, come down here and run cameras. Ludo's always looking for ways to help us with scripts and changing with the stuff, everything we do with VFX. There's Alex is basically our audio person, and she's one of our editors. So there's just a huge group of people that come and make any of these productions possible, and a big, big thank you to them. And then
When
to
I,
Corgan
yeah,
as a
yeah,
whole.
I'd like to acknowledge, like, because there's so, it's rare. It seems more rare today that a project just exists in one little department or area at Corgan, and this really was another great example of, okay, well, you took the technical design services and they had a large part in this. And you took interiors and they had a large part in this. You took furniture, they had a large part in this. Branding had a large part in this. So none of it could have been done without the support of our executive committee leadership team.
Yeah. The elders.
Yeah.
ELTERS.
So that whole group made this even doable.
Yeah, I would like to thank online community subreddit. Video engineering was a huge help. Made a lot of posts, and asking probably some pretty dumb questions. Got really great answers. All the YouTube channels, A to Z Productions, Doug Productions, VMix YouTube channels, fantastic. But definitely made this possible, and like by the time I had the question, they would just release someone would have a video on that subject of like, well, how do I do this? And someone would release it. So great job listening to the pulse of where people were at throughout the pandemic, and that community just ballooned when during the pandemic. So it was awesome to see and get answers from people like that.
I think that's a great way to end it, because they were like, that's another thing. And in addition to our team, in addition to Corgan support and their teams, like having the resource of the video community it would not be here if it wasn't for them. So that's a great way to end it. Here's a little teaser. Our Lucid chart that shows the video signal.
Which is signal flow.
Signal flow.
Yeah, and Lucid chart was just what we made it in the program, but it's a giant chart from lens to broadcast, like layers of audio, power. For the most part, it's accurate.
So if you've made it through the whole episode, including all the corny jokes to this, and you want to see that, we're glad to give it away. Just put something in the comments below, and
if you want us to
share
post it.
Yeah. And if you have any questions, or if there's any way, we only have this set up because people shared ideas and solutions with us. We're happy to continue that and share them with you. Just contact us below. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time on The Square.